And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Bitcoin Talk. Now, in this episode, I will be talking about the core versus Bitcoin knots debate. More specifically, highlighting a little bit what has been ongoing in regards to Bitcoin development. With that, I want to say it's actually just like the title said, the war for Bitcoin, database versus currency, is one of the hot topics, especially sparked by a recent pull request made by Peter Todd a few weeks ago, which sparked an enormous amount of debate with fact and fiction on both sides, I dare say, in regards to, well, the pros and cons of making a variety of changes. Now, let's just jump straight into it, and I'm going to show you guys the first pull request here on the Bitcoin GitHub, which actually sparked said discussion. And it all came down, and it all started with this here. Remove arbitrary limits on OP return data carrier outputs, and so you guys can read on screen. As per recent Bitcoin Dev mailing list discussion, also removes the code to enforce these limits, including data carrier and data carrier size config options. These limits are easily bypassed by both direct submission to miner pools, Mara Slipstream, and forks of Bitcoin Core that do not enforce them, e.g. Libra Relay. Secondly, protocols are bypassing them by simply publishing data in other ways, such as unspendable outputs and script 6. Form of data carrier outputs remain standardized, yada, 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 yada. The whole technical details can be found on the GitHub. You guys are seeing the same URL as I have here. So basically, what is this? Well, this is a so-called pull request. It is a kind of proposal being done in the Bitcoin developer GitHub, whereby Peter Todd is telling or asking the people, well, you guys, is it possible to remove the current limits on the OP return function? The OP return function being a quite well-known data carrier function, or allowing for data carrying outputs. And currently there's a limit of 83 bytes on it, and he's actually vouching for, hey, let's remove it, and as well remove, and that's being highlighted. I'm going to highlight it here, sorry. And also removing the choice of implementing filters that allow to implement limits. So what gives? What is this all about? Well, like I said, this is a little proposal being made by Peter Todd, like I said, to remove the limits and as well the configuration option for doing so. I'm going to quickly check out something. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, you guys on YouTube. Screen didn't show, but here we are. This is the proposal. Anyway, where was I? So yeah, what is the goal for this? What's the use? Well, we need to get back towards a much earlier episode I did back in 2023, where I started talking about ordinals and runes. What are ordinals and runes? Well, quite frankly, they are NFTs and smart contract capabilities on the Bitcoin blockchain. People who remember that episode and subsequent episodes I've done know that I'm not too much of a fan of ordinals and NFTs. Neither am I a fan of allowing for smart contract integration on Bitcoin network, in a sense that Bitcoin is to be considered as a currency. That's how we all know it, about how we know all it to be. Bitcoin as a currency. I mean, if you take the white paper, clearly it's Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's the title of the white paper. So we know it's about currency. Now, this here is on the other side. Since the ordinals and runes have been incepted, created, and have the spam attack have been occurring since 2023, a variety of VCs, companies, and individuals have been trying to slowly change or degrade the Bitcoin network into a free-for-all data cloud storage system. And, well, a Bitcoin core dev like Peter Todd making, well, this proposal, this pull request, is a legitimate sign there are people, well, wanting to change Bitcoin at a fundamental level. It no longer is about being a currency, but about being a data cloud storage system. Now, there are arguments to be made. However, one of the main rejections I have against this stance is rather simple. Like I said, title of the white paper reads Bitcoin as Bitcoin peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The entire blockchain, everything from nodes to mining to block size, even though it has changed over the years from 1 megabyte to the current max limit of 4 megabytes, has been geared towards Bitcoin being used as a currency, not really fit for a free-for-all cloud storage system. And luckily, I'm not the only person who rejects this stance of Bitcoin as a database. Others are with me, and this can be easily seen by the amount of not acknowledged voters. So that's the concept NACK you're seeing here on screen. Telling people, yeah, no, we don't want that. By reason, it is very obvious what is being pulled here. They are trying to implement more spam or trash data onto the Bitcoin network. Now, there's a variety of reasons that some say, well, it's good for the network, for miner revenue, etc., etc. I'm not going to delve deeper in on it right now. People who follow me on social media know my exact stance. Now, positive thing is, in the last couple of weeks, a lot of debate occurred, as this is the original pull request. And, well, the topic was closed. Well, with, as you guys could see, a tremendous amount of people saying, nope, we're not going to do that. Even though the closing was met with a lot of controversy. At one point, it had a little bit of a flashlight relationship with contributors, in the sense that it was opened and closed several times after, in short whiles, I'm going to say. Can't come up with the correct Dutch wording here, the English wording here, sorry. Flashlight relationship, whereby people were allowed who were in favor to give their acknowledgement that they were in favor, and those who were on the sense of not acknowledging it, well, were thrown out. So in the end, yeah, a majority of the developers said we're not going to do that for their own various reasons. You guys can see here underneath the entire debate with reasoning from a variety of developers who have access to the GitHub, the contributors, etc. So yeah. Now, it has been closed, and people would say, yeah, that means discussion has been closed. Sadly enough, not really. The one which sparked it all has been closed. And at that point, they said, okay, it's closed, issue is done. However, let's reopen it and change the wording. And they left out the option of removing the option to set a limit. They said, well, we're going to degrade it in order to appease the masses, the public outcry which occurred on social media, to appease the non-acknowledgement of a majority of them. And let's leave it at that. But we're going to open it up and make a compromisable pull request, I'm going to say. And that's actually the one we're seeing here. And up here, they say, look, we are going to retain our argument where it concerns the data carrier. And we actually want to have as a standard have the filters which allow to limit the arbitrary data after the OP return function to be removed as a default, but the choice remains, although degraded, that it can be implemented. And basically, it's a rewording of, well, this one. It's basically the same proposal. However, there's less focus this time on the option in order to put in the limits. And now the main treat is about on there. And now the main treat here is more about, let's remove the data carrier by default. Now, this as well is seeing quite a lot of negative review. Not as much as the first one. Reason hereby is, well, there's rumors and there's, some controversy going on that sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed again, and that only specific contributors may start to vote, and certain contributors and core developers are suddenly barred from making an acknowledgement or a non-acknowledgement. Generally the latter, and this can actually be seen by the amount of Bitcoin core developers here who are reviewing it. Luckily, I'm going to say, majority still is in the non-acknowledgement camp. Can be seen here. Even the amount that says concept not acknowledged outranks the amount of people who were for acknowledgement. Now, just like the other pull request or proposal, underneath you may find some discussion ongoing. I'm going to say, if you're a technical guy, give it a read. It gives a nice overview, some nice insights to the pros and cons, some of the lies being told, some of the turned truths. With that, I want to say half-truths or lies being told, etc. For that, I also want to refer towards the next slide here, and that's the standardness OP return restrictions, the entire debate which sparked mid-April, which gives you a better idea. I'm going to highlight this by reason, like I said, this is Bitcoin Core versus Bitcoin Nodes, but more importantly, Bitcoin as a free-for-all cloud storage database versus Bitcoin as a currency. And I must say, this is, by the way, the mailing list of the Bitcoin Core developers group. And in here we see, well, the entire discussion having taken place before the aforementioned proposals, as highlighted here, were made. So the discussion isn't something new. It's been ongoing for at least a few years. However, I'm willing to share this with you guys because it highlights something quite important here. It highlights a certain attack on Bitcoin from core development perspective out, in the sense of core developers being tipped off by VC venture companies, being paid to, well, make certain proposals which favor a business model. So in that sense, we can say certain core developers are being tipped off by companies in order to change Bitcoin into something it shouldn't be. Why I'm saying this? Well, if you read what I'm reading here on screen, naturally, standardness rules exist for three main reasons. However, one of the hints we're seeing here, Citrea. What is Citrea? Well, that's a company who wants to develop on the Bitcoin blockchain. It is a company who, let's just say, can spam the Bitcoin blockchain with arbitrary data in order to create their very own altcoins. I'm going to be nice for once. Wants to put in their very own NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain, etc., etc. But for that, they need to have a change of rules on core fundamental level. What? Well, they are going to need a lot more, how to say, a removal of the current existing limits of the OP return. Meaning, behind the OP return function, you have 83 bytes of size to put in arbitrary data. Currently being used by spammers, which refers back to other functions whereby bloating can exist on the Bitcoin blockchain. However, Citrea says, look, we want to go a more fair game, but the 83 for what we want to do is not going to cut it. We want to, I'm highlighting it here, because this is something highlighted by George Provost, another one. They say we are only going to need 144 bytes, meaning that Peter Todd and perhaps a few other core developers are in favor or being tipped off by Citrea to pull the arbitrary data limit, wanting to change Bitcoin into something else than currency. Not for the greater good, no, but in order to fill their own pockets as funded by a VC company. This is something, ideologically speaking, Bitcoin as a world currency, Bitcoin as freedom money, censorship resistant. This is something which goes straight against Bitcoin ideology. And this is the main reason why said requests were being made. It's not something you want to see. Now, I gave a little, did a little article here on my own website. I'm going to show you guys as to what's happening. Yeah, this is a little treat made by Simple Mining. I advise you guys to read it through, because this is the entire history of spam on the Bitcoin blockchain. The entire discussion as it how came about. Everything from filtering non-monetary transactions like the monkey JPEGs to seeing Bitcoin as a payment layer. And really, I'm going to say read at your own leisure. And actually it doesn't want to show here. Sorry, that's for the guys on YouTube. But yeah, I'm going to say look up Simple Mining or just click through on the article I've shared on my website if you're logged in on Twitter, and you can see the entire rundown. I'm going to close it down here, there as well. Basically, we're highlighting what the effects are. Next slide I'm going to share with you guys. It's one too early. Like I said, when I said that certain core devs are tipped off, I wasn't playing around. This is a literal screenshot I'm sharing here, whereby there's actual confirmation that Peter Todd, the same guy who made this request, has been tipped off. So I'm going to show you guys once again. This is the proposal he made. And that's him admitting he was funded to make said proposal. So this is a little something quite important to know. It is an attack vector which needs to be considered. More and more will we need to start safeguarding Bitcoin from such venture company attacks, whereby companies will approach potentially financial, core developers with financial troubles, or which are open to leverage, I'm going to say, and are not ideologically motivated to contribute and sustain the ideological ideas on which Bitcoin has been based. Anyway, I'd like to share this one. This came to my attention by Grubbles on Twitter. And this is actually what Satoshi, the original founder of Bitcoin, said in regards to Bitcoin as a free-for-all database versus Bitcoin as a currency. Basically, now you guys can read. Now, if it gets too technical, the gist is this. Satoshi himself said Bitcoin isn't fit to be used as a free-for-all cloud data storage system. Simply no. He makes a distinction, but he says, look, it isn't geared to be just that. And that's exactly the same thing I said about 15 minutes earlier in regards to Bitcoin, that it isn't geared to be a free-for-all cloud storage system, despite the beginning of the blocks towards 4 megabytes, so that no longer maximum block size is 1 megabyte, but currently is 4. Despite the Taproot update, despite SegWit, etc., Bitcoin is geared to be used as a currency. It's not fit for being a cloud storage or file storage system. It simply isn't. That's basically what Satoshi is saying here. This should normally end the discussion, but you know how things go. By now, this isn't the end. By reason Satoshi vanished, I'm going to say, from Bitcoin development, to which I say that might be true, but I can only tell that he stopped contributing to Bitcoin Core under said pseudonym. Of that, everything else is said in regards to Satoshi. However, the entire debate does have its positive points, in the sense that what we are seeing now is a bigger distribution of Bitcoin clients. Whereas before, and you guys can easily see it on the picture here, there were a lot of Bitcoin Core nodes, a lot of nodes making use of Bitcoin Core software client in order to run a node. However, since the debate sparked, we are seeing a redistribution. We see more and more people changing their software client, changing from Bitcoin Core towards Bitcoin nodes or the others. Though I must admit, the nodes you are seeing here, BTCD nodes, Bitcore nodes, Bitcoin nodes, etc., they are seeing less heightened share revenue. It's mostly nodes. Now, this is a screenshot from a few days ago, about a week ago. Actually, I'd like to share with you guys the actual stats, and we're seeing here that Bitcoin Core nodes are approximately at the same size, but we're seeing that more and more Bitcoin nodes are piling up. We're also seeing an evolution in the amount of nodes being active and reachable. We have 28,822, whereas before we were at, I didn't put it on. Yeah, it was at about 20,000-ish, if I'm not mistaken. So a few hundred extra nodes have been added. Extra nodes means a more distributed network. Extra nodes mean a more well-protected network on a larger scale, which is a great thing to have in regards to security on the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, in regards to nodes, this is something I also highlighted in my article, and is a test that I've done. And I'm going to let Mechanic here, or Grass-Fed Bitcoin, speak in regards to spam. Why is spam such an issue on the Bitcoin blockchain? Why the discussion? I mean, if you would listen to the arguments of the altcoin of the altcoiners on Bitcoin, you would say, yeah, but the spam, as we like to call it, bloats the blocks, fills them up more, which means more miner revenue, etc., etc. However, Bitcoin has several layers of security. You have the miners, which I do as well, which validates and sends transactions onto the blockchain. But there's also the node runners. Node runners, from my own book, are the Bitcoin police. Is going to be a special one for Twitter. Here we go. And, well, what are nodes? Nodes are essential of the Bitcoin network, as each one helps the network running in a decentralized and distributed manner. They verify transactions. Can they be relayed towards the network? Yes, no, etc., etc. One of the most important aspects in regards to node running is there is no incentive at all. You do not get paid in order to run a node. It's one of the reasons why within the Bitcoin community we always say, if you are a miner, be self-sovereign, run your own node. Redirect and connect your miner with your own node. By reason, your mining, Bitcoin mining is an incentive. You earn Bitcoin. Running a node doesn't do so, so it's best to combine the two. It's one of the reasons why back in the day when the white paper of Bitcoin was written, that Satoshi didn't really make this distinction between node runner and miner. Why? Well, at that time, hash rates weren't as high in order to secure the network or to find the next block. And you could very easily interchange node runner and miner with each other because you did both at the same time. However, as the network grew, as earning Bitcoin became more and more important and more lucrative, well, a distinction started to be made. Simple node running didn't cut it. You had to have dedicated miners doing the work, all the guessing work in order to mine a block. And, well, node runners, as there was no incentive, was actually being pushed down. And if you were to compare the amount of miners versus active node runners, you would see that the node runners would get ratioed quite badly. Meaning, despite the numbers you've seen here on screen, in total, there will be a magnitudes more miners present on the Bitcoin network. Why? Like I said, node running has no incentive, but it also means that node running needs to be done economically. And at that point, well, is spam not one of the best things to have? Why? Spam impacts the mempool. And I know there has been discussions I've been involved in where people said there exists no such thing as the mempool, whereas I say, yes, it exists. My mempool is the mempool. Another guy's mempool is another mempool. Anyway, not going to get into the technicalities here. The thing is, there is bloat. There's transactions I do not want to relay. I want my node to be economic and to remain, sustainable. Now, what do you need to do in order to run a node? Well, you need a client, one of the ones you see here on screen. And you need to download the Bitcoin blockchain and keep your computer running 24/7. Here's a special one. This is my little node, because I'm a node runner here. Mempool statistics, here we go. A little special one for the guys on Twitter. This is my mempool, as you guys can see. So I'm running a node. And the computer needs to be on 24/7, plain and simple. Now, what are the limits to node running? Where does it become costly? Well, first of all, you need hardware. And there exists plenty of node running hardware. With that said, you've got umbrel nodes, you've got start to 9 nodes, etc. Little devices, computers, and basically it's a small CPU with plenty of storage capacity in order to save the Bitcoin blockchain on, and which needs an internet connection. That's basically it, what you need. However, the thing still consumes electricity, and well, you still need a lot of data storage. Now, naturally, modern computers all have about 1 terabyte of memory which can be used. However, the costly things here in regards to node running is your internet connection and the electricity used. Electricity and your internet connection are 2 costs. If you're mining, you already have both, and well, generally it's a little surplus, few cents or something like that, which need to be added. If you're not mining, well, it's going to be a cost, and since it's running 24/7, that cost on a yearly basis can be quite tricky. Internet connection is going to be your biggest cost. Why? Because you are exchanging data with the internet. And depending on your internet provider and the contract you have, things can become quite costly. Now, here in most of the Western world, we do not really, how to say, have to look out where, especially here in Europe, Belgium, where I am, I do not really need to take into account the amount of data that is being exchanged in and out of my home in regards to internet connectivity. It's unlimited where I live, according to my contract. However, like I said, nodes need to be economic. It needs to be lightweight enough in order to have a bigger amount of mainstream adoption. And let that be one of the problems here that Mechanic is highlighting. Spam2, the unspam transaction output set from 4 gigabytes to 12 gigabytes times 3. If you're actually worried about it, preventing a couple kilobytes a year from more from Citria's fail case isn't going to make a dent. You need to actually filter out malicious activity instead of trying to coax them into doing something. It's doing it some other less harmful way. This is incentive compatible, as nodes obviously want to be on board for this. Relax spam filters, prevent a minute amount, and make 100 kilobyte OP returns trivial when they're a pain in the ass. Now, tighten spam filters for positive, it happens. Basically, what Grassfed Bitcoin is saying here, should we remove the filters, we will see Bitcoin bloat, which is a fact. Now, what we're missing here is data. And I'm an asshole, and naturally, as you guys could see, I run a node. Better yet, I get people on it, and I made a little treat, a simulation. You could also see it in the finishing article, and I've been playing with my Bitcoin Knots node, and I said, look, as a standard, because I do not want to have spam relate to my nodes, I do not want to help out NFT shillers in spamming the Bitcoin blockchain with, well, unspendable transactions and scamming people into buying JPEGs. I said, look, data carrier size on my node is 0. But despite this debate, I said a few days ago, well, you know what? I'm going to make a small simulation. And these are the results. And as you can see on the tweet itself, yesterday at around 11:12 at noon, I allowed for spam to be relayed on my node before setting it back to 0. Is the network strain my mempool had? This is a direct image from what I've shown you guys earlier. And what do we see here? 11 or 12, if you can see where my mouse is about here. The dynamic memory usage, my mempool, very, very, very small. But I allowed it back at 83 bytes, the standard for Bitcoin Core. And what we see here is an immediate tremendous rise. I had a dynamic memory usage which neared the 100 megabytes. I believe it's going to be 90 or something, approximately. Yeah, 80 to 90. And then it's stepped down a little back towards, well, 25 megabyte level before I set everything back towards 0. So what we're seeing here is user activity during the day, is when generally the Americans are awake. But we see that the dynamic memory usage was quite high. Now, how high, if you want to know? Well, very high. I'm going to switch towards the article I made. I'm going to say read up on it because it's going to be a shortened version of this live stream I've done. So node strain, have incentive to economize, yada, 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 yada. You see here, I put it on 0 bytes, configuration options, back towards 83. Referral to the treat. And that's it, I believe. Yeah. So those are the statistics. Very nice. Highlighted. So that's the strain as we saw it earlier on the tweets I've shared. And do I? Ah, damn it. Didn't share it. Yeah, that's a little F up on my part. I was hoping to show you guys what my mempool looked like the day after when I put everything on 0. Well, this is going to be a special one because I believe... Oh, damn it. I didn't do it. Hang on a second. Well, this is going to be shown on a... Come on. I'm going to try something else here. I'm not going to log in here. Damn it. Yeah, so sorry for the guys on YouTube, but I'll not be able to show it here. I was hoping I could. Anyway, for the people watching on Twitter, you can see that in regards to data relayed 24 hours later with the spam filters back on, well, everything went back down. And my peak was only 1/3 of what we saw earlier. Meaning that there's a lot of strain on my internet connection going on as a result of, well, allowing spam here. Which isn't all too great because in certain parts of the world, well, you need to pay for the exchanged data. Meaning if you exchange 1 gigabyte per day, it can cost you up to a few dollars a day in order to have an internet connection, which can create an incentive to stop running a node. And that's one of the reasons why I say node running has no incentive. It needs to be done as economically as possible, meaning needs to be as cheap as possible. To have a PC run 24/7 with electric usage, which means you best need some hardware or have a dedicated computer which doesn't use as much electricity or isn't used very intensively, on which you can start running a node in order to lower the costs of electricity usage, but as well have as little as data exchange as possible in order to save your private internet connection. Especially for someone as me who is mining here at home and node running at the same time, I need a decent internet connection. Otherwise, while I'm mining and running a node, the possibility exists that my capabilities of my router will be surpassed, that it goes beyond its limits and my internet connection suddenly starts to falter and fail, that I can no longer use, well, the internet and social media or even live stream conveniently and easily, by reason there's too much of a data exchange due to spam. So that's one of the reasons why I'm against spam when it comes down to it. One of the other reasons here is that we want a data efficient system and not full blocks, which is one of the main counter arguments. With that, I'm going to actually end this episode. I've spilled a lot of digital ink on the subject. I try to remain as objective as possible. However, I have to admit that I'm squarely into the Bitcoin as a currency camp and not in Bitcoin as a free-for-all cloud data storage system camp. Just by the simple reason, read the title of the white paper. Know how Bitcoin has been built. Peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The system and blockchain and how blocks are created and their sizes. It was never meant to be a free-for-all file storage system. Congestion will be created, the network wrecked with spam and arbitrary data, which pushes out valid transactions and actually undermines Bitcoin use case as a method of exchange or even as a store of value when it comes down to it. So yeah, if you guys have questions, you can always ask. I'm going to take a look here if there are any questions going on. I see chat's empty, which is fine. I'm heading back to StreamYard here to see on YouTube. No questions remain, so I'm going to stop my screen here. Towards here for notes. With that, I'm going to say thank you guys for watching. Hope seeing you next time. Now, if you support me and the things I do in regards to Bitcoin education, etc., please like, subscribe. You know the drill. With that, I'm going to say thank you guys for watching, and until next time. Bye.